On the 22nd of July, 2011, a rainy Friday in the Norwegian capital Oslo, a grey van rolls up beside the Norwegian government quarter, parking right outside the building of the Prime Minister's office. Out steps a man, 32 years old, named Anders Behring Breivik. He has no prior criminal record and is dressed in what appears to be a police uniform. Earlier that day, he had sent out a compendium, 1,500 pages long, to over 1,000 recipients across Europe, ending with a final note. I believe this will be my last entry. It's now Friday, July 22nd, 12:51. Sincere regards, Andrew Berwick, Justice Her Knight Commander, Knights Templar Europe, Knights Templar Norway. On a nearby security camera, he can be seen walking away from his car, calm and composed, before disappearing around the corner. Moments later, at 3:25 p.m., the city erupts, as the sound of a massive explosion tears through the heart of Oslo. The car outside the government quarter has exploded, sending glass, concrete, and panic into the streets. Sirens wail across Oslo as dazed civilians stumble through the smoke, unsure of what has happened. But this was only the beginning of what would become the most horrifying terror attack in Scandinavian history. As emergency services scramble to make sense of the carnage, and the media begins broadcasting the first reports of the explosion, Breivik is already on the move. This was only the first part of his genius plan. While the bomb's 7-minute fuse was burning, he made his way to a second vehicle, a silver grey Fiat, parked outside a few blocks away from the government quarter. Unhindered and unnoticed, he leaves the city behind and sets course for his second target, a small island 40 kilometers from Oslo, known as Utøya. Utøya is owned by the Workers' Youth League of Norway, known as AUF, and every summer for the last 60 years, it has been a host to a summer camp, in which hundreds of members gather for social interactions and political workshops. This year, 564 people attended the camp, most of them teenagers and young adults. It doesn't take that long before news of the bombing reaches the summer camp. A sense of unease begins to spread among the young attendees. At 4 p.m., one leader of the camp, known as Mother Utøya, gathers the attendees for a short briefing. She reassures them with calm authority, repeating what many believe to be true. The safest place in Norway right now is here, on Utøya. The reality would soon prove otherwise. At 4:26 p.m., roughly an hour after the bomb exploded in central Oslo, Breivik arrives at Tidifjorden, where the ferry to Utøya departs. He stays seated in his vehicle, listening to the radio as news outlets report on the explosion in Oslo. A first casualty has been confirmed, and experts are suspecting that Islamists are behind the attack. For about 30 minutes, he remains there, before finally driving down to the dock. He has brought 2 weapons with him, a pistol and a semi-automatic rifle, equipped with a bayonet and a laser. The trunk holds a back sporting bag, containing smoke grenades and over 1,000 rounds of ammunition. As Breivik approaches the dock, he interacts with the guard. Using a forged police ID, he identifies himself as Martin Nielsen of the Police Security Service. He claims he's been sent to secure Utøya following the bombing in Oslo, and is led on the ferry without any further questioning. The island is 600 meters from the mainland, and the trip takes around 7 minutes. As the ferry reaches the island, Breivik is greeted by Mother Utøya and the camp security guard. The 3 begin walking up the hill toward the main building, exchanging a few words. But within moments, as they reach the crest of the hill, he draws his weapon. Gunfire echoes across the island. The pair are struck by multiple rounds and collapse to the ground as they become the first victims of what would later be known as the massacre of Utøya. Breivik continues uphill towards the island's cafe and nearby tent grounds, where hundreds of young attendees are gathered. Dressed entirely in black, his appearance evokes the authority of a security officer, and for a brief moment, some mistake him for one. As he makes his way up, he kills another security guard, before finally reaching the building. Right outside, he opens fire, killing 3 people on the spot. As panic spreads through the nearby tent area, he turns and fires again. 2 more fall. Not missing a beat, he moves back toward the cafe. Inside the cafe, confusion and fear ripple through the rooms, as shouting begins to erupt. camp leaders urge everyone to evacuate, unaware of just how much danger they're in. Some begin to flee, others hesitate, frozen by uncertainty. Breivik enters the cafe building and continues his rampage. Within 3 minutes, he moves through the smaller hall, a corridor, and finally into the main dining area, killing 13 people in the process. By this point, more than 20 lives have already been taken. Chaos quickly spreads across the island, as campers scatter in every direction. Some dive into the cold water in a desperate attempt to swim to safety, others seek cover in buildings, or by clinging to the island's steep slopes. Many flee into the woods, only to find the trees too sparse to provide real shelter. It doesn't take long to realize that the island, just 500 meters long and 300 meters wide, offers nowhere to hide. The campers are stuck in a death trap, with no path to safety. After the massacre inside the cafe, Breivik exits and crosses back through the tent area, killing 2 more attendees as he walks towards his next destination. A narrow path that winds through the trees along the western side of the island, known as Skjalgestien, or the Path of Love. At this part of the island, many campers are hiding along the steep cliffs that descend toward the water. The perpetrator moves slowly along the narrow trail. He comes across a group of youths lying motionless, attempting to play dead. He opens fire, killing 10 of them. Continuing along the path, he finds more people hiding on the slope below. 5 more are killed, their bodies tumbling down the rocks towards the shoreline. At 5:40 p.m., Breivik eventually reaches the southern tip of the island. There, he spots several campers trying to swim toward the mainland. He begins shooting, but this time, no lives are lost. That, however, is of little consequence. In fact, the purpose is to drive them further into the lake, where the cold water and distance may finish what the bullets didn't. Breivik would later describe the island's surrounding water as a weapon of mass destruction. 1 camp participant drowns, another falls from a steep slope by the water and dies from the injuries, and 2 more are killed as a terrorist reaches the forest east of the school building. At this point, emergency services have logged 28 calls from the island. A squadron from the Norwegian counter-terrorism unit, originally en route to the government quarter, is redirected toward Utøya. At 5:52 p.m., a local patrol from the Nordre Buskerud police station arrives at the ferry landing across from Utøya. But the situation is confusing. Orders they receive are unclear, and officers stay on the mainland. Meanwhile, a separate emergency response unit is directed further north, to Utøya camping. Though the local station is aware of boat available nearby, this information is never passed to the unit on site. Instead, responders are told to regroup at Storoya, a completely different island just north of Utøya. The Delta Unit, Norway's counter-terrorism force, are the first to reach Storoya, followed shortly by local emergency responders. None of them realize that they are on the wrong island. The critical miscommunication delays the operation further, while the massacre on Utøya continues unchecked. Meanwhile on Utøya, the attacker makes his way toward the main building, where he refills his ammunition. From there, he throws 2 smoke grenades and heads downhill, back to the dock where the rampage began. He fires more shots into the lake, aiming at a boat trying to escape. He hits the boat multiple times, but the people on board escape unharmed. The shooter turns and begins moving uphill once again. On the path, he finds a discarded cell phone, picks it up, and continues north, toward the far end of the island. By 5:59 p.m., 38 minutes into the massacre, police receive a call from an unknown number. The caller identifies himself as Anders Behring Breivik, commander of the Norwegian anti-communist resistance movement. He claims to be on Utøya and says that he wants to surrender. But the call ends abruptly, and the rampage continues. On the northern end of the island, Breivik kills 8 more, 3 near Stoltenberget and 5 along the shoreline at Bolshevika. Minutes later, on Storoya, locals spot the Delta Force as they board a red inflatable boat, trying to correct their mistake. 11 officers cram into a vessel designed for 10, all equipped with Kevlar and carrying heavy gear. As the boat slowly leaves the shore, the heavy weight causes the engine to get flooded, and the boat stalls just 100 meters from the mainland. With the help of a nearby civilian, the force quickly transfers to a new boat and continues the journey. Once again, they are overloaded. 10 heavily armed officers crammed into a vessel built for 5, slowing their advance. After only a few hundred meters, they come across 2 larger civilian boats standing by. By dividing up, the officers are finally able to move towards Utøya. While the police remain stranded afloat, many survivors are still trapped in the strait between Utøya and the mainland. With no official rescue in sight, locals have taken matters into their own hands. Numerous boats race across the waters, pulling people from the nightmare and bringing them to safety, all while the shooting commences on the island. In the absence of a rescue force, Breivik returns to the path of love. Around 6:13 p.m., he takes the lives of 14 young people seeking shelter by a pump house on the island's western shore. He continues down the trail, but stops when he hears the sound of a helicopter closing in on the island. Fearing it might be part of an armed police operation, he places a second call to the police at 6:24 p.m. This time, he identifies himself as the commander of the so-called Knights Templars, claiming the mission is complete and expressing his intent to surrender. He asks to be connected with a task force, but the request goes unanswered, and the call ends abruptly once again. Breivik continues moving down the trail. The helicopter he feared, however, wasn't part of any rescue mission. It belonged to the NRK, Norway's public broadcaster, dispatched to document the unfolding tragedy from the air. The first patrol of the Delta unit arrives on Utøya at 6:27 p.m., but they land on the opposite side of the island. Somewhere ahead, through the trees slick with rain and smoke, the sound of gunfire still echoes. Above them, the news helicopter from NRK circles the island, its cameras capturing the final moments of the massacre. On the ground, the killer moves with cold purpose. At the southern tip of Utøya, he guns down 5 more victims, before disappearing again into the forest, moving in the direction of the school building, where 47 terrified campers are crammed inside, holding their breath behind a locked door. The second wave of officers pushes forward through the terrain, as the sound of bullets scream across the island. Unaware of what they will encounter, they eventually reach the schoolhouse. All is quiet, bullet holes riddle at the entrance, traces left by the shooter himself. But inside, against all odds, everyone is alive. The officers continue, step by step, as rain lashes the trees. Then, just as they emerge from the woods, they find him. Anders Behring Breivik stands only 15 meters away, weapon on the ground, arms raised. "I look at you as colleagues," he says. "You're not the ones I'm here to kill." At 6:34 p.m., 3 hours and 9 minutes after the bombing, Anders Behring Breivik surrenders. 8 lives lost in Oslo, 69 lives lost in Utøya. The youngest victim, only 14 years old. Law enforcement worldwide suspect that Islamist terrorists are responsible for the devastating attack, but it quickly becomes clear who the real perpetrator is. It is one of their own. The document sent out by Breivik on the morning of the attack offers a chilling glimpse into the warped worldview that drove him to commit mass murder. Matthias Gardell, author and professor of religion history, is one of the first to read the 1500-page manifesto, called 2083, a European Declaration of Independence. According to Gardell, it becomes clear that Breivik was deeply influenced by fascist thought, shaped by 3 major ideological currents: anti-Muslim conspiracy theories, cultural nationalism, and radical anti-feminism. In his view, violence is necessary to alert and mobilize the native population of these threats. Breivik describes the attack not as an end itself, but as a marketing operation, intending to draw attention to his manifesto and inspire the founding of a new militant order he calls the Knights Templar. In the final section of the manifesto, the killer becomes disturbingly personal. In a self-conducted interview, he reflects on his childhood in a wealthy Oslo suburb, spending his teenage years playing basketball, tagging graffiti, and what he describes as early encounters with violent Muslim gangs. An origin story he frames as a root of his radicalization. He shares personal preferences, his favorite drink, his favorite brands, and even lists personality traits: optimistic, pragmatic, creative, and hardworking. But beneath this shallow portrait lies a man preparing for the slaughter of children. The attack on Oslo's government quarter might have seemed like the strategic target, but for Breivik, Utøya was the real center of gravity. He saw the summer camp not just as a gathering of children, but as a nest of future political leaders. He had also fantasized about capturing and executing Gro Harlem Brundtland, former prime minister who had visited the island earlier that day. In the terrorist logic, the more brutal the act, the deeper the fear. The more innocent the victim, the louder the message. The trial against Anders Behring Breivik lasted for 10 weeks. On the 24th of August, 2012, he was sentenced to 21 years in prison, the maximum sentence under Norwegian law, with the possibility of indefinite extensions. He remains incarcerated at the time of this video. It quickly became clear that many things went wrong when Norway was hit by this terrorist attack. The July 22nd Commission concluded that the bombing of the government quarter could have been prevented through better enforcement of existing security measures. The authorities' ability to protect the people on Utøya was insufficient. A faster police response was possible, and the perpetrator could have been stopped earlier. Police chiefs rejected the criticism, insisting their officers acted to the best of their abilities amid the chaos. But those efforts were not enough to prevent the deep scars left by July 22nd.